Keep your hands and head inside the vehicle at all times. Buckle your seatbelts, check your mirrors, sit on back and relax. It's lights out and away we go for the Tall and Short of It podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tall and Short of It podcast. Coming to you live, running through the six with our woes. I'm your host, Justin.
I'm Aaron. Welcome back, everyone. As Justin alluded to, we've got a recap of the Canadian Grand Prix this week. We've got plenty of League of Legends talk as well. All the good stuff that you all are looking to find here. Justin, how are you doing? It's good to see you, my man.
Yeah, doing really well. Good to see you too. Excited to get into the meat of the pod this week. We got a lot to talk about, like you said. But first of all, I want to hear how you've been. Give me your rose, thorn, and seed for the week, sir.
Sounds good. So I will start out with my thorn. And so my thorn this week, the main one was that Colleen caught COVID. I think I mentioned it last week, but she was still kind of struggling through that through the weekend and all. And so she's like doing fine, but we kind of were just stuck home and everything. She's not feeling tip top, and so it was not the ideal way to kind of have a nice stay at home weekend. We still made the most of it though, and so that'll get to my rose. So for my rose, just the outdoor space in and around our apartment has been really, really nice. So we were able to kind of still utilize a lot of that while Colleen was sick and stay like away from people. So we were able to go and hang out on our rooftop area for a bit. We went and did some walks through the local graveyard, wandering through, which is fun and interesting. There's a lot of very, very old tombstones and everything in there, so it's been pretty cool kind of checking that out. I feel like that's probably a weird, I don't know, like, I don't think it's weird to go for a walk through a graveyard because you're just like casually walking. You're being like relatively quiet, pretty respectful. Sure. I don't know how I would feel about this. Is something Colleen and I have talked about a little bit, but she's like, oh, we could ride our bikes through the graveyard. I'm like, that seems a little, in my opinion, like I would feel like I'm being disrespectful, even if other people don't. I feel like that's like, I don't know, going for a walk and casually just like going around compared to riding a bike through a graveyard and all. And not like just riding it through as like you're cutting through it, but like riding just around the paths, right, since it's a pretty large graveyard by me. So
yeah, then why not just like throw a blanket down, have a little picnic. You could set up the badminton net. I mean, honestly, it'd be probably pretty nice.
I mean, it is some nice green outdoor space, but I do feel like there's a line, and so that's kind of where mine is. So we got to enjoy the outdoor space around our apartment a lot, which is nice. And then my seed is that I am looking forward to going on vacation this weekend. I have not really done much vacationing over the past few years, just obviously with the pandemic. And then prior to that, when I worked and lived down in Virginia, I really wouldn't take much time off because I was always stressed out about what is going on at work and like if I'm gonna end up with all this craziness and like not be able to relax. So other than the occasional beach trip here and there, this will be kind of a nice few days off to just relax a bit.
Yeah, that's really sweet. Often I find myself like wanting on vacations. I think I'm just like restless in general, or I'm just like a homebody. But yeah, overall getting a couple of days free and clear is pretty sweet. So I'm looking forward to that for you because that's really sweet.
Thanks, man. So I'm definitely ready for it. But yeah, that's my rose, thorn, and seed for this week. But what have you got for us? What's going on over there down your way?
My card table was stolen, and that's my thorn for the week. So stolen, more like conveniently thought it was theirs and took it when they moved out. Um, so most of the efforts to recoup said card table has gone into the void, so that's pretty frustrating. But yeah, I think it's gonna
Where
come.
was this at?
It was in like at my office, at my massage office, where we would play cards. So
Right.
I stowed the table like in the kitchen, off out of the way, and when one of the other tenants left, they took the table thinking it was theirs. Because we reached out to them and I was like, "Yo, that's our table that you took." And she was like, "Oh, blah 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 blah." I thought it was we're like, "Nah." Has yet to return it. We've reached out, so it's just like, oh man, that's tough.
That's
But
annoying because
yeah,
especially once people go, they are like, and I've experienced this in like hotels and property management. Just like once people like once you're out of sight, you are not a priority for them anymore. They're like,
right.
yeah, nah, I'm gone from here. So like you'll probably get the table back, but it'll be on their time. It'll be like, well, okay, I was in the area and I had it in my trunk just in case I was like by, and then they'll drop it off. But
Yeah,
it's
and that'll be way too late, not on my timeline. So overall, me and Sarah have just been like grexing back and forth about it. But
that's
yeah,
annoying.
I think it'll come back. My seed for the week, however, is a little spicier. So I have been waiting for an opportunity to recoup the very lucrative investing opportunity from last summer, 2 summers ago. So, Double Masters, Magic sealed product was a banger. Had the Mana Crypt, the Force of Will, the Jace the Mind Sculptor, all sorts of sweet cards. And like a fucking Yahoo, I just bought a box and cracked it all open. I was like, I want to see what's in here. And now those boxes are literally like $800. They were retailing at like 275, whatever, like when you
Whew.
originally buy them.
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, cool. Some of the singles I got are like, I'm very, very pleased to have cracked them open. However, given another opportunity, I would say, fuck the singles. I want to invest in the sealed product. So this coming Double Masters 2022, I kept my eyes open. I did some savings, and I was like, all right, it's gonna be insane. So the first available listed price was like 270. The next day, the next day or 2 days later, they start doing like the big spoilers, the big like, whoa, these are the cards in the set. Within the first 24 hours, the price went up $15. Within the next 36 hours, the price was up to 300. Boxes are now sitting at 316.
Wow.
That's before shipping and taxes and everything.
Sheesh.
And now after like the spoil, they've released a lot of what's in the set, like obviously just number go up. So I am like over the moon that I was like, okay, I see a mistake. There's an opportunity in the future to not make the same mistake, and I made a plan. I was like, I'm going for that. So we did that. I'm just gonna throw it up on the shelf and check back in 3 years and just fucking quadruple all my monies.
Nice. That's definitely
Hell
a good
yeah.
investment, and that's not. It's not easy to quadruple your investment in that amount of time for most things. So that's a good one if you're able to put that away and keep it. So
Yeah, yeah, we'll see, but I'm definitely stoked on it. And then my Rose, just a small one. Sasha, my dog, her belly has been like just a little upset. She's been yakking up some of her dinner sometimes, and we just had her to the vet. They kind of gave her like overall clean bill of health, told us what's going on and some ways to fix it. So I think she's going to be doing okay for now. So that's some peace of mind.
Nice. That's awesome. I'm glad to
Yeah,
hear
man.
she's doing good. Was it like a diet thing, or is it more like just older dog thing?
It was like an esophageal thing where
Oh,
we had her bowl too low. So we just got her a high bowl, and so now
yeah.
hopefully it'll be fine.
Yeah, I've heard a few different dogs having similar issues. So, awesome. Very good.
Yeah, nothing
Hopefully,
too scary.
yeah, that's definitely a nice, pleasant thing to happen. It's just like you don't have to stress. It's not something serious. Easy fix. So hopefully, she'll be doing better off now.
Yeah, for sure. Happy Sasha, happy life. That's for sure.
Absolutely. And you know who was unhappy this weekend was Checo and a number of other drivers. So I
Yeah, I would
do
imagine
want
a
to
number of them.
get into the F1 talk this week, but first to
Let's
start
do it.
us off, of course, we talked about it last week. We were discussing our opinions on it. What happens? The FIA puts out a directive about the cars, the porpoising, the issues with like just driver safety and all. Like we saw Lewis really struggling after the previous Grand Prix in Baku. So they say come out, issue this directive that says that the vertical acceleration will have a limit that's acceptable for oscillations for the drivers. So they're implementing that. I don't believe everything's fully set in stone yet, but there's no directive of X height of your car or anything like that. So it does not punish the teams that had figured out how to resolve the porpoising issue. But it does allow for all the teams to kind of keep driver safety in mind and maintain that. So I do appreciate them finding, and I know that obviously it helps Red Bull because they've not had porpoising issues, but in general, I think that that's the way that most of these technical directives should go, is to allow not hamper teams that are doing something well, but to kind of fix things for teams that are not quite doing things the right way. So
Yeah, and especially when driver health and safety is concerned, I think that's a fine place for these directives to be like put in place. If it's just like raw performance in the sense of like trying to elevate a team in like a maybe a certain disingenuous kind of way of like we want the field to be up at a certain point, so we're gonna like help this team but not that team. Whatever, that's probably not that good, but from the perspective of the health of drivers, yeah, I think it's fine. And it is a pretty good precedent moving forward as rules and regulations change, as this era of car development moves forward. It sets a pretty good precedent from the FIA, that um, they will be sympathetic to the concerns of the teams and the drivers and the principals, and say, yeah, this may not be like the funnest in the court of public opinion, but guess what? It keeps everybody safe and happy. So drivers, teams, we hear you. Let's do that. I think that's, I'll say it again. I just think it's a strong precedent to set from the FIA.
yeah, and I think it's a good one. And I know people are probably thinking about like we had mentioned, the DOS system that Mercedes had the other year that was ruled out from being used and everything. But they didn't stop it from being used through that season. It was allowed to continue and everything, and just was not allowed to be used following years and everything. So I think that is like a technical directive that does kind of just specifically hamper one team, which ideally is not the way that I would like to see it. I think that this was handled pretty well overall, so hopefully this does set a precedent moving forward to not hamper teams that have figured out something innovative, something creative and all, that can kind of level up the field in general. But to just maintain that level of safety, like we mentioned. So yeah, leading into the Canadian Grand Prix, that was the biggest news that was really announced, along with, of course, the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc going to the back of the grid for grid penalties, since he was using a new power unit and turbo and this and that and everything else for this week's race.
Yeah, and I don't remember, did that come before or after practice or a qualifying session, or did Ferrari know that going into the weekend?
No, I'm pretty certain they knew it going into the weekend. That was announced on the 16th, last Thursday, so that would have been before any of the practice sessions or anything.
Sure. Okay.
But I mean, it was already kind of assumed, due to his car issues in Baku, but that does kind of give us a little bit of discrepancy between the qualifying and the results there, and then the actual starting grid leading into the race. And so we had, during the qualifying, we had Leclerc run in Q1, make it into Q2 because Yuki Tsunoda was also taking engine penalties. So if he beats Yuki, he starts in 19th instead of 20th, which is what ended up happening. I was pretty surprised, though, just looking at the qualifying and everything. I was pretty surprised to see both of the Aston Martins out. We did have wet weather qualifying, but Seb is typically a wet weather fiend out there, and so I was pretty surprised to see him that far down the grid, down in P17.
Yeah, there's something to be said for the drivers that are like strong in the wet but don't have the fastest car, though, right? Like, is the performance loss that comes with the wet track and the tires and having to manage those laps like very differently, especially wet qualifying. I'm curious if there is some kind of disconnect between, like, or what would that be? It would be like an inverse relationship graph or something, where the higher the skill of the driver only matters to a certain point, and then like the car factors in. I'm curious if there's something like that in effect with a qualifying like that, because you're right. Even in the Aston Martin, Seb has been able to get a little more out of it. And even Lance has been pretty decent in the wet and decent in qualifying overall. So you're right. That is kind of a curious standout.
I guess the other thing to mention, though, is they both were knocked out in Q1, and in Q2 and Q3 the track did start to develop a bit of a drier line. Things were drying out. People were switching to the intermediate tires as opposed to the wets, and so I think when it is that wet out, it is a bit more of a crapshoot for sure. Where it's like, sometimes maybe you're too far back from the person in front of you, and that water that they pushed out of the way is like now settled right back into where it's at, and you're ending up with some different wet patches and all. But
well, and the spray looks brutal. Like, that's got to be so tough to deal with. So then there is the element of just like waiting the whatever 300 meters that, you know, the spray has died down, and like sacrificing time and saying, I need that guy to be so far away because I can't fucking see the circuit.
Oh, 100%. Like, it is unbelievable looking through those driver cams. I don't know how they see anything. But just kind of moving up the grid in the starting and everything. We had some other unfortunate and kind of disappointing positions for some of the drivers. Lando DNFing in Q2 and crashing out there, and then Checo similarly just having a really rough go of it in the qualies and everything. And then I'm trying to. Did he crash out as well in quali? Or
yeah,
I thought so.
He crashed in Q2, I believe.
Yeah.
Or it would have been crash in Q2, and then but that also makes him like it wasn't necessarily the worst. He could have been further down with that DNF. He actually like got kind of lucky. He should have been 15th. That's kind of all I was getting at. But yeah, one of the drivers got away clean. They just tapped the wall real even. They were able to back it up. Right. Kind of similar thing happened to Sergio, but his wing got put into the put into the barrier a little bit. Wasn't able to get the reverse.
Yeah, I think that was Alex Albon who just barely tapped it.
So he was able to get it, but Sergio was not. So yeah, that was really tough for them. And we'll get to it, but then heartbreak in the race for Checo, has a mechanical failure. So just like tough weekend for Checo overall.
Very rough weekend. So disappointing start, like position for him. Definitely unfortunate and not what Red Bull's looking for when you have Leclerc taking an engine penalty.
I know.
It's just not the look that you want. But Zhou Guanyu makes it into Q3, which was awesome. He had a really solid weekend. And then further up, the Haas cars, we have Magnussen and Schumacher both up there in P5 and 6. That's their best combined start that they've ever had in a Grand Prix, which is phenomenal. And then, of course, the man...
I think that's the obvious standout for qualifying, right?
That and the man, the myth, the legend, the rookie, Fernando Alonso.
Well, he was a rookie last year.
Sorry, the sophomore. Coming in with a phenomenal P2. Still about 0.6 back from Max up in P1, but just an insane lap that he put out there, beating the Ferrari, beating the Mercedes. Just like he was cruising and really put a nice lap down. So it was a pretty exciting qualifying, I would say, to say the least.
Yeah, definitely. It seems like Fernando Alonso's qualifying was kind of the other side of the Sebastian Vettel coin, where you have season driver in the wet with a competitive vehicle, and then they're able to like really lock it in and get that and get the second position, where Fernando Alonso in that result, like you would say he's out of position, right?
Oh yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty good. Carlos obviously gets the P3, and this is the weekend that we thought was drawing near. If you've been listening, we've been wondering and kind of pondering the orbs a little bit, saying that Lewis Hamilton's gonna get there eventually, and P4 put him really well in contention to have a good race come Sunday.
Yeah, and after Friday in one of the practice sessions, saying that from the setup they were using then, that the car was basically undrivable, to go from there to putting in a P4 quali is just unreal. So very good on him to put that together and have a nice qualifying. And of course that led into a very nice race for him as well. So a pretty interesting race. As we mentioned, Checo, of course, ended up having a mechanical issue with the car. I believe hydraulics or gearbox that ended up having him stop around lap 7, I think. So super early in the race. And then I think my biggest heartbreak, though, from this race was Mick Schumacher.
Of course.
Unbelievable, just qualifying, really great to see him up that high on the grid. And then just to have the car kind of break on him and everything during the race and DNFing is rough. I'm looking forward to him getting points. He's definitely showing some progress as a driver and some growth, so that's good to see. But Haas had a pretty rough weekend after an insane qualifying and starting positions. We see Magnussen going wheel to wheel with, and it's just so funny to me that, and like, not ironic or anything, but Lewis gets into these wheel-to-wheel battles and bumps into people all the time, and he almost always manages to like come out unscathed when both cars are able to continue, when it's just like a bump of the wheels or anything like that. But Magnussen ends up with a broken front wing, gets black and orange flagged, which makes him come into the pits and change his nose, and then he was just pretty much out for the rest of the race. It was pretty brutal.
Yeah, it's a tough opening sector from the start of the race, though. Obviously, it's going to be really tight. I don't think either driver was really doing anything wrong.
Oh, not at all.
They were just squeezing around, and unfortunately took the wing damage. I do want to stick on Mick Schumacher just for a second.
Sure.
In the radio message when he had turned off the car, oddly like confident tone in his voice. He said, "Man, we were on it." Like, it didn't sound like any lack of confidence, anything. It was just like, shit, the car crapped out. It wasn't anything he did. He had a great qualifying. So you're right. I think we're seeing great progress from him, and in that little window into the mentality, I would say he's got some pretty good morale about him.
Yeah, and I think that's good because I think there have been a lot of questions about him as a driver just in general because of his name and all. People are always gets looked at with a very critical eye.
Sure.
There's definitely some
even
fun.
I put it to him last week.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely some fondness that comes along with the Schumacher name, but with that name, it also carries a pretty heavy weight of expectations as well. So seeing him have a really nice weekend and make some good quality progress in his driving and in his level, that's awesome to see. So definitely big props to him for this weekend. I'm very happy to see him making that progress.
Sure. But some more heartbreak in Canada. McLaren tries the double stack, and Lando gets just the small straw in that scenario. And I'm not sure if that was like, jokes probably aren't proper here, but like, it just seemed really weird for that to be a pretty like well predicted scenario. Many of the teams had drivers on the radio calling about basing strategies on at least one more safety car or at least a virtual safety car late in the race.
Yeah.
So if that was the consensus among some of the top drivers, why did it seem like McLaren got so caught out? But they were going for the big play. They were going for the double stack, but they were clearly out of sorts for it.
Yeah, and I think a part of that is just the fact that Ricardo, I think they had trouble with his front right, getting it on or getting it off, one of the two, and so that slowed his pit stop. Lando ends up having to completely stop behind him, so the double stack is already out of whack. And then I think in just the mayhem of things not going right, they didn't have the wheel out for the front right for Lando, so just a brutal way for that to go. And then for just for the rest of the race to end up having just not the kind of finish that you're looking for with both drivers ending up out of the points. Definitely a pretty rough weekend for McLaren, and it seems like they still have a lot to figure out with their car and setups and everything. So definitely a tough one for them overall.
Yeah, I agree. Seems like seems like of the expected top teams, McLaren is definitely falling short of that big time. Even while their like timesheets may look a little above average, their performance is still just like kind of rickety. Their scenario feels like back marker performance, even if they're able to eke out these like less than dead last performances. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's just like they're never, or not never, but they are having issues with even fighting for points and just getting stuck
Mm-hmm.
just on that cusp. And so
Mm-hmm.
when we see, especially with teams like Alfa Romeo, we have Valtteri and Zhou Guan Yu ending up in the points in P7, P8, which is a really nice performance. We've seen them
Big
continue
time.
to put together some solid drives, but it does start to just make things pretty interesting in that midfield for the constructors. I mean, we are seeing a very, very tight little group of three there in the 4, 5, and 6 position. McLaren still has a slight lead, but Alpine is only 8 points back from them, and Alfa Romeo only 6 points further back from Alpine. So just a 14-point gap there for that 4, 5, and 6 position. So all of these points really do matter, and so I think that's part of why I was pretty disappointed with how Fernando and the team kind of got their strategy wrong a bit this weekend, because after an insane P2 in qualifying, we see him out there and we see safety car 1 happen, doesn't pit. Safety car 2 happens, doesn't pit. And so now Fernando's watched the entire grid basically get free pit stops. He's out there doing what he can, but it went from being, oh, I think we're going to be racing for like 4th place with like
Mm-hmm.
George and Lewis to, oh, I think we're going to be racing for like 7th place with Charles. And then it's like, oh, I think we're going to barely stay in the points. And it's like, that's not how you want that weekend to end. I was really pulling for Fernando. I wanted to see some excitement out of him, so I was a little bummed that ended up being how his weekend ended.
Yeah, of course. And after even such like a great qualifying session, like you said, putting it second, I think I'm curious if there's some kind of disconnect between him and the pit wall, him and the communication where like so is that just an example of him not having all of the data, thinking that the long stint is the way to go? Like he feels like the car's okay, he feels like his pace is okay, but then was he just not heeding the words of the pit wall? It's curious when things like that happen.
Yeah, and listening to his post race little brief press interview,
Hmm.
it sounded like he, from what he said, missed being able to go into the pits, but like right before like he just missed the pit lane when the safety cars
Gotcha.
came out. Basically, he had just gone by. But I do also think that that's something that is kind of on the team and on the pit wall. I mean, we see these other teams that they see something like that happen, and you see guys diving in the pit lane before the virtual safety cars announced, but like they are anticipating that happening, and like, yeah, that could bite you in the ass if you go in there and it ends up being that, I don't know, the car is able to just make their way off the grid relatively easily. But I think that some of the teams are willing to take that risk, and when you're Alpine, I'm surprised that you don't kind of take that risk in one of the 2 virtual safety cars that we had early on.
Yeah, no, I agree. And especially when you think of, oh man, who said it? I forget who said it, but it just like it 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 like reformed the way I understand race strategy, where he said teams aren't like making these split second decisions in the moment. He said they're activating decisions that were set up way in advance. So that's what like the plan A, plan C, plan D, when they're saying that, these are the things that they're talking about. So it's like they would hopefully have put a plan in place where it's like, okay, laps 7 to 21, if there's like a word of a safety car, we're dashing into the pits. So then everybody's aware that like at least that's a possibility or something to be prepared for. So when you think about it as these pre-made decisions that are just activated in the moment, it is odd that they were a little bit behind the curve.
Yeah.
But you know what it makes me think of when we're talking about it is it makes me think of any of the moments in a pick ban when you're watching and you're like, the Leona would be really strong here, and it makes sense. The team plays it. The player's a god on it. And then you see, like, the left and the right, the hover, the over the shoulder, and then they just lock Soraka and just fucking lean back. It's like, wait, we all said Leona. We all said, right? That feels like that kind of moment where it's like, well, yeah, but right now I know better. I know what we said, but right now I know better.
Yeah, and so it I think could be a combination of that too, of just like thinking that they have the best strategy and all, but I think that we've just seen a lot of team strategy errors throughout the year so far. We've seen it inhibit and hurt Ferrari. We've seen it do the same for Alpine and some of the other teams as well. McLaren, just it has been biting a lot of the different teams, and so I'm hoping that I want to see. Yes, I want to see strategy and all make a difference in how the race ends up, but I do also want to see the drivers getting their best opportunity to put their skills on display and all. And so definitely a bummer for Fernando, but Esteban Ocon picked up some solid points for Alpine though ahead of the Alfa Romeos up in P6. But the getting up to Charles Leclerc, I was pretty surprised, I think, at his struggles kind of making his way through the field this weekend. I expected that new engine, that new turbo, all that stuff to be similar to what we had seen with the Mercedes when Lewis was getting those engine penalties and making his way through. So I expected a bit more from Charles, and I was surprised to see him even at some points on the medium tires versus drivers on the hard tires, and just not being able to have enough pace to get past them. And I don't know if that's because of the deg that the Ferrari was getting on the tires, or if it was just other people, I don't know, taking better care of their tires and all, or what the situation was. But
well, listen, after 70 laps, a couple of race slowdowns, he made it from 19 to 5th. I think at a certain point it would be more of we would be more talking about the failure of Lewis, Carlos, and Max, of allowing him to get any higher than he did.
That's fair.
Eventually it starts being a failure on the other drivers and the other teams. Like, my man was all the way back there.
Yeah.
So I think P5 is a pretty aggressive finish for a start like that. Yeah, even with the engine advantage, at the end of 70 laps, he made it 14 positions.
Yeah.
I think that's really strong. And it shows the grit, a little bit of perseverance. So yeah, the holiday would have have him be like racing Lewis at the end for P3 for the podium. But the just realistically, I think P5 like looks pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's definitely like salvaging a weekend that you have kind of a just bad luck or like is not going to be the easiest going into it. I think that the reason that I was I am a little down on it is I think he should have been able to be up there fighting with George and Lewis, because he went on the hard tires to start the race. He made up a lot of positions by not pitting when other people did under safety car. He was making his way through the field, and then he just got stuck behind, I believe it was Esteban Ocon, for just a lap after lap. And you hear the broadcast, and they're like, he needs to start like getting one position per lap, and then you just see 3, 4, 5, and he's still behind Ocon, just like stuck there on, at that point, I believe the medium tires, so Ocon's hard tires, and just like not having the pace. That, I think, hampered him just immensely from being able to get up to fighting for that P3, P4. And so I think that's why I was a little down. Is I think he salvaged it pretty well for the weekend, but I think that there was still that extra bit that could have turned out even better for Ferrari, especially on a weekend where Checo ends up out of the race. They end up not making up quite as much as I think they would have hoped in the constructors fight there. So,
yeah, I think this may be a scenario of Charles Leclerc didn't lose the race; he just ran out of time.
A little bit,
Okay.
I think.
Fair enough.
Yeah, well, he just lost a little too much of that time being stuck behind Esteban. So props to Esteban too, but Mercedes really pulling out a great performance in that P3, P4, as we had mentioned. George continues to stay in that top 5 for every race this season. So he has now made it eight races without finishing outside of the top 5. So that's one. Big props to Mercedes and not having any sort of reliability issues, knock on wood, that to at least as of yet hit George. But really just awesome performances by him throughout the year. And then big props to Lewis getting back on the podium, the place where he got his first F1 win 15 years later. F1 or ESPN's F1 Twitter account put out a picture of Lewis and Max next to each other after the podium and just titled it "Nature is Healing," and it got a good chuckle out of me.
Yeah, that's pretty funny.
So Lewis back on the podium, first race this season since I believe week 1. So.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming. Obviously, we knew it was going to happen. The most exciting thing, obviously, was the hunt from Carlos Sainz down on Max.
Yeah.
Dude, that was like 14 laps after the restart of Carlos racing, like within a second of Max. There was, I believe it was one lap where Max broke the DRS and he stretched it to like 1.3 or whatever. I flipped.
I cheered.
Like, I was like, that's it right there. That's the game.
I won't call it up.
It was so intense. It was so intense. But the more analytical angle, the less like podcast bias angle is how incredible, like, there would not have been a hunt like that with the old cars. So, like, yeah, I understand we're having some kind of troubles, but, dude, the hunting capability of these vehicles is insane.
Yeah.
Like Carlos would have been boiled three laps after the restart, and Max
Well,
would have been gone.
he would have only gotten one opportunity. He would have charged up his battery, like tried to get inside that DRS, and then that lap he would have had to put in a lap, use all of his energy, use the DRS and everything.
Right.
And then if he
And
didn't do
doesn't
it,
stick it,
then he's just stuck in really, really dirty air. And so I completely agree. I didn't think about that side of it. I was so caught up in the excitement. And
it was 16 laps.
Yeah,
Of
and
less than 1 second gap.
with Carlos on brand new tires and Max on 10-lap-old tires as well, which was pretty insane. And so, like, the big takeaways that I got from that, one, sad for Carlos, because he is right there. I think that's his like sixth P2 that he's had in his career, and just hasn't been able to get that maiden victory. He put a lot of good pressure. He drove really well at the end, but the biggest thing for me was Carlos was looking to put pressure and jump on it if Max made a mistake. Max just didn't make a mistake. It was a very, very mature drive at the end. He was keeping his gap just far enough. We saw a couple times where in one sector of the lap Carlos gets it down to 4/10, 3/10, somewhere in there, and then by the end of the lap and the long DRS zones, Max had pushed it up to 8 or 9/10, where it was just a bit too far of a gap for the Ferrari to make it up. So really mature drive, because I was on the edge of my seat, like almost just waiting for something to happen, waiting for a lockup around the hairpin that Max locks a wheel and Carlos gets right on his tail and has a go at him, or just running too wide here or there, and he just didn't. He put in under pressure, like you said, 16 really good laps. And so that was very impressive for me to watch Max just work his way up the grid and everything.
Yeah, I didn't see as much as a wiggle, a wobble, a shake, or a shimmy. He was right on it the whole time. So yeah, but I think even in the moment, if Carlos did ever get the overtake, I probably still would have cheered for the overtake, just because it was so goddamn exciting.
Oh, it was so exciting. It was awesome, and that I love to see that kind of racing. So that was awesome for the race to just finish that way, and everything. And so with that, Max now he's ahead of Jim Clark and Niki Lauda in the standings for most F1 wins in history.
Wow.
So he has
that's crazy.
So he's 9th on the list. He is one behind Jackie Stewart. Then he's got a couple other current drivers and a couple of other legends of F1 ahead of him, but 9th overall in wins at 24 years old is pretty nutty.
Incredible. Yeah, it's an absolute treat to watch. I love seeing like, it's the kind of driving that, like, yeah, it's like seeing history being written, you know what I mean? I think that's really cool. So a great Canadian Grand Prix. I'm very much looking forward to next year's.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it's one that we'll bring to you live from Canada.
We are hoping so.
Big hoping.
Yeah, but an awesome Canadian Grand Prix. Looking forward to the upcoming weeks that we have. We've got Great Britain next at Silverstone, so lots of excitement there. That's a couple weeks out still, so we have a little week off here for upcoming F1.
Yep, but what we do not have time off from is League of Legends. We had so many games, bunch of different regions. Everything is firing off. We picked a couple. We hand selected. We weeded through the chaff. We squeezed all the melons to see what the best fruit was going to be. So we handpicked these games for you. We're going to be talking about RNG versus FPX. We're going to be talking about T1 versus KT. We're going to be talking about EG versus 100 Thieves and EG versus Cloud9. We wanted to focus in on the North American squad that performed oh so well at MSI, but let's start with RNG versus FPX.
Sounds good. So over there in the LPL, RNG with their new top laner Breathe coming in. I was like, I don't know. I was a little nervous for RNG because they did not start out that series too hot. The FPX with especially the top lane Kale was just brutal. It's also just really interesting, and as we go through these matchups, I will look to highlight some of these picks, but seeing the difference between the LPL, LCK, and then over in North America in the LCS, it's been interesting just seeing all the different picks that have come out in that RNG FPX series. That the Kale in the top lane was so strong, and I think we're gonna I feel like that is, there are like two very different ways that you can go with your drafting and everything, but that is just a very strong one, having the ability to do AP or AD on the Kale in the top lane and kind of balance your comp that way and almost have a flex even though it's not moving lanes. But RNG just really got kind of run over in that first game.
Yeah, and I think there were a couple of different factors. The jungling from FPX was super aggressive. They targeted the top lane pretty well. Klid on the Lee Sin looked really strong. Obviously the aggression from top lane that we used to see, he was known for his who's the Wart Rider guy that hops off, what's his name? The champion, Kled. Yes, yeah. Kled was known for Kled up top, if I remember correctly. So yeah, the aggression translates well. I think he was kind of MVP of game one. The Lee Sin really did work for FPX, and they were just able to translate that early game aggression into some strong objective control.
Yeah, and going into game two, we see a little bit of a different style from FPX, but I thought that they very easily could have won that match. That was tight for quite a while. Klid on the Kindred along with Care on Galio. That was a awesome combo, and to kind of wombo. They focus the top lane very heavily. Get in there, the Kindred ult to keep him alive, along with the Galio coming down on top for all of the CC, and then a free hitting Kale was a really interesting style. Breathe played really well on the Fiora, though. He was just putting out tons of damage. And then Gala, of course, with the with the Ezreal, also putting out. No, he didn't have a Triforce, so no tons of damage.
It's so hard not to hear Freak when I hear that phrase.
Yeah, and neither of them had a Triforce, so I should have saved that. But but Gala and Breathe really carrying the team damage for RNG, winning some pretty close fights as well, to kind of push that into their favor and eventually win game two.
Yeah, I think what was unfortunate about that game two draft is RNG grabbed the No, that was the yeah, that's right. Okay. So the RNG had the Karma Ezreal in that game too. I think what was kind of unfortunate was the close range nature of the FPX draft, where after a certain point, the poke was just going to be so much at the neutral objectives that you'd be starting at like, half health, three-quarters health on some of your carries. So while I do think it was a very strong comp if they were able to get on top of you, it ended up just being quite the range advantage for RNG, like as the team scaled.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I think game two was really close, and then game three was just a run over from RNG. Just strong early game, strong mid game. Their draft was great. Like what's interesting from RNG, even in the game that they lost, their first picking Viego, like that says something so much about their play style where on blue side every time they want that Viego. They don't care what happened in the previous game. They don't care. That is their top priority. Blue side grab the Viego and it works. They can be so aggressive no matter what their mid lane pick is. The Viego has so much early game control. A lot of times he's able to single crab with a contest of the second crab, or just double crab by just pushing the enemy jungler out. Viego has so much pressure early. I love the RNG focus on it, and I think it just sets them up for so much strength into these mid games where it just looks like they have so much control.
Yeah, 100%. I think the Viego is a huge pick, and I've also liked how they have put Xiaohu on more of these supportive picks. In game one, the Lissandra didn't really matter too much. They just got beat pretty heavily in all sides. But in game two, the Lissandra was a huge help with peeling for their team and avoiding, like we said, that team comp of FPX getting on top of them and being able to brawl in their conditions. So in game three, seeing him on the Twisted Fate, just locking down the mid lane, having the ability to roam and kind of put pressure around the map, and seeing the ability for just as a whole them to get the bot lane ahead there was pretty significant, and just kind of led to that game going very heavily in their favor.
Yeah, big time. I think what's really interesting about the Lissandra pick for the mid lane is it gives the mid laner some agency in when team fights start. So obviously it gives you with I think it's called the Frozen Tomb is the ability. You can either use it on an enemy or you can use it on yourself. So with the claw walk in Frozen Tomb yourself, you can start a fight if your team is pretty close behind you. You can get a good amount of AoE damage, freeze yourself, give your team time to follow up. So it acts as like an option for a pseudo engage. It acts as an option for like a catch out comp as well. Like you can just freeze somebody down, drop the rest of your CC on top of them. Now you have a 4v5 and that's butter. I think Lissandra offers a good amount of options when it comes to the like mid to late game team fights, and you're not really sacrificing anything as far as laning goes. She has quality push with the Q. So overall, it's easy to see why teams are gravitating towards this Lissandra, because once you get outside of 10 minutes, I think Lissandra's a house. Either in the counter engage, the pick comp, the poke comp. I think she really has a solid place in the meta right now.
Yeah, and so seeing Xiaohu pick that up and be able to utilize it pretty well, I think is speaks a lot for their team going forward, because I think they're allowing Breathe to play these carry champions, the Gangplank, the Fiora, and kind of do that and allow Xiaohu to be more supportive. And so I think that so far, especially as they are getting more comfortable with the new lineup and everything, to just allow them to continue to play well, win, and kind of play to their strengths and all, as they're building that team cohesion. So
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so that was a great series from RNG. Took it in 2 games, dropping the first one took it in 2 games after dropping the first one to FPX is what I should say.
Yep. So really solid series. But then moving over to the LCK, we see some very different kind of drafts and picks and everything. Some of the champions that were making it through over in LPL in that series of RNG FPX were getting taken out pretty heavily in the pick ban phase. I think we see the Kale get banned out, we see the Gangplank get banned out, and so we're seeing them on different champions, but also we got to see some different styles as well in this matchup, particularly game one. For one, I think that it's going to be interesting to watch throughout the summer split, but the difference in the top lane is pretty significant. In the LPL, we're seeing a lot of the more carry focused champions. We're seeing that a little bit in the LCK, but we're seeing some of those other champions like the Sejuani work their way into the top lane, and I think that is due to the decrease in the increase in survivability that they've made changes to so that champions can't get burst out, along with increases to tower damage on dives. Decreases in tower damage to the opposing team. So having something very tanky with lots of CC like the Sejuani in the top lane that can't get blown up so easily on a early gank like it would have previously, I think allows it to be in a spot where you can be up there, farm up, not be too concerned about getting ganked and getting put really far behind, and then allows a lot of just agency and utility that you would normally see coming out of the jungle, kind of in that top lane role. So I think that's something that I want to keep an eye out if there are other champions similar to the Sejuani that we start seeing come into the top lane, kind of throughout this split, because that was an interesting one for me.
Yeah, I'm worried what's going to happen if a team takes a bad ranged matchup with the Sejuani. I think that's not going to go well if you're having good information in the draft. I think it could be okay, but even against the Gnar, that just seems really risky to me. I think you're putting your top side at a pretty big disadvantage, where especially because these Sejuanis aren't taking flash either, it feels like a very all-in choice that I'm not sure how many times the teams are going to make. It definitely seems strong, definitely has the laning power. With the one ability, you get some wave clear as well, so obviously it's doing fine in that department. It just seems a bit risky. Not bad, just risky. We saw a workout in game one for KT Rosser, which I think is awesome. I think the engages went really well. The ultimate was kind of backbreaking for some of the carries, and the ability to just stun a bunch of different people, I think, is super useful. Obviously, in fights, it just seems like a risky laning phase to get through, I guess, is ultimately all I'm saying.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's still not even though you have the survivability, I think you can easily get put behind if you're in a bad matchup. But against the Gnar, it didn't seem to struggle too much. But also just game one, I mean T1's draft was just kind of bizarre and out there. They were trying something very different, and so I mean props to them for coming out and just giving it a shot. But the Callista Camille in the bot lane was just not it didn't work out like I think they expected it to. The Kassadin against the Azir is a decent counter, but I think they just ended up with the bot lane getting a little too far behind, and in the mid lane with the focus that KT put on Faker early as well, to just not be able to have their kind of just go in team comp, get
Yeah.
to where it needed to be able to win those team fights. They just got put a little too far behind for that. So we see them go back to something a bit more standard in game two.
Yeah, and what was interesting, just last point on game one, I think it was a highlight of Tom Kench's strength, big time. You used the term last time, disruption. They were never able to kill the Tom Kench. He was too tanky. Their dive comp was never able to get the initial kill that's supposed to steamroll, and it was that Tom Kench that was just always in the way, eating the friend that was getting killed, just like totally swapping around the focus. So yeah, I think the Tom Kench was a real backbreaker for the team comp. But yeah, T1 looks to swap up their team composition here for game two, which I think obviously ended up going pretty well. Corky right now, it seems like, is just doing a disgusting amount of damage between the phosphorus bombs and the Qs. It's no surprise that players want to pick it.
Yeah, and I mean Faker, his use of the package too, like going in there, leaving that burning trail behind him, and everything was utilized very well in game two and three.
Yeah.
He looked really really good. We do see KT go with a little interesting support pick of their own with the Jarvan at support. I just don't. Even with all the kind of support focused bans and everything, I'm not quite sure what teams are seeing with those kinds of, like, the Camille support in game one, the Jarvan support with the Kalista in game two. I understand that there's multiple CC options and things like that with those champions, but I just don't see what it brings that something else, a Leona, a Thresh, something like that, doesn't.
Sure. Yeah, and I definitely understand that, especially when we're used to teams that are just like thinking about just like kind of chalking the 2v2 and thinking about just like doing their best to play for the late game and the team fighting. Jarvan Kalista just says, I want to kill you, hopefully on level 2, but then when you don't make it happen, it just trickles down in power level so much quicker than the other picks do.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, if Jarvan gets like a double kill really early in the game with a sick knock up, he's able to like roam mid, pick the mid laner, you're like, okay, well maybe there's something to it. It's just unfortunate that the kill, like, quote unquote kill lanes, they just really don't ever look that good in competitive, because like you can still win a 2v2 with Leona.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
and she'll do so much more later. So yeah, I definitely see your point on that one. I see what they're going for, but yeah, really, really all in and against the Tom Kench,
Yep.
bro, you gotta bench the Kench if you're gonna try and go forward. Bench the Kench, because
It's so strong right now, and he gets so tanky. You do see him get banned out by KT in game three.
Yep.
And that was just quite a brawl of a game. I mean, back and forth so much. There were a number of different times that I just wasn't really sure how that was going to go. Owner with a big Baron steal in that game that kind of turned things on its head. But I mean, we see a 4 Baron game, 44 minutes. That was a pretty wild one overall. It just kind of ended up coming down to who's going to win the last big team fight and then run through the base.
Yeah, and there was some hasty teleports, some top lane shenanigans with long pushes and everything. But yeah, overall, T1 was able to bring it back. But man, soul fight, 38 minutes, like that's a really late soul. Both teams, I think both teams were on soul point. So either way, it was yeah, ridiculously close. I think Owner is just. The steal on the Baron was so clean. It was like everybody just stopped playing for a second, let him get the Baron, and then resume play. All right, let's go.
Yeah, he has looked phenomenal, and his cohesion with Zayas as well. I've been really really impressed with. They were really able to work very well in the team fights and kind of play around each other to get some solid picks. To the Zayas diving in with the Gnarl, jumping into groups of KT players and allowing his team to just kind of free hit from the outside was huge. But Owner was getting some really really nice picks, really good chase downs after fights as well.
Yeah.
So very very impressed with them so far. And I think even though this was a very very close telecom war in general, I do think that T1 has the upper hand moving forward, of course, but I think KT Rolster looked pretty solid, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they kind of continue to play going into the rest of the season. In spring season, we saw them have not the most phenomenal of seasons and dropping out of that top 6 into the 7th position. So I think that they are on the cusp and looked pretty good in that first matchup for potentially down the road.
Yeah, I agree. It is obviously a pretty long season, but yeah, so far their early performance is looking really strong. So that was a really fun series. T1 takes it 2-1 over KT. But yeah, the let's use the Gnar play of Zayas to kind of lead us into Evil Geniuses versus 100 Thieves. I think there was a play, regardless of JoJo's Rockets, I think there was a play where Someday really botched it. The later game teleport into the river, they were chasing. He chose to hop the wall and then just had to run at the enemy team, gets a really bad gnarl, and then they just lose the fight. I'm not sure that was a great use of the Gnar, but I'm just using that to lead us into the next game, EG versus 100 Thieves.
Yeah, and the EG versus 100 Thieves, this is the championship matchup from the spring split in LCS. So one thing to note, which I thought was pretty interesting, I saw Parth tweeted that 100 Thieves, so this is the first time in 7 years that an organization has fielded the same starting roster for 3 consecutive splits. The only other time in LCS history that this has happened was the original Cloud9 roster.
Yep.
So very rare to see a team continue to field the same roster moving forward, but they do seem like they have something good there, and I think that they're realizing as well that their cohesion and their kind of ceilings that they have for their team and their play is what they are looking for, and better than what they see fielding other players, bringing in someone new. I think that they're pretty happy with their just teamwork and team play so far, so it makes sense to kind of keep running with that roster.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of an experiment into the void. Like, with that being the exception to the rule, it's interesting to see what happens with a team if they just stick together. I mean, how many rosters were broken up because of, Link's tiny violin and so much TSM bullshit and this and that? Like, it's interesting to see a team like really like stick that cohesion through and look like a championship winning team while doing it.
Yeah, and
I think it's quite impressive.
yeah, and after Worlds, especially last season, so many teams are always looking to find upgrades. Who's the weak link? Who do we need to? What do we need to shift around? And so props on them for sticking together. Unfortunately, in this first matchup with EG, their rivals from last season, EG just really has looked so good to start off this LCS split. They I feel like they just picked up right where they left off in at MSI, playing very well as a team, inspired, looking like. I mean, obviously, this is way, way too early, but Inspired is playing on an MVP level and has been, I think, since last split as well. So he's continued to look really good. But they controlled the map very, very well. Especially in their objective control, they had really solid dragon control. Were getting towers and rift heralds to kind of push their lead, and they just kind of controlled that game from start to finish. I felt like.
Yeah, big time. And they were just aggressive. They know the right fights to pick, and after they've picked them, they'll likely kill you. They are aggressive, they move forward as a squad. Their fingers are fast as hell, and they have the vibe on the Rift as a hive mind where it's five entities all working as like one thing. And once you see teams start really moving like that, that's when it's trouble. That's when you're likely playing against a different beast.
Yeah.
And the EG team really kind of has that. Um and whether it's up to like JoJo's confidence just leaking into the other members, whether it's Inspired's like leadership from the jungle role, I don't know what it is, but they are playing incredibly well. I think Impact is just a contentious top laner. He is just doing so many right things. They at every role they're impressive.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and not to knock 100 Thieves because they do have a solid lineup and played pretty well, but overall it was just Evil Geniuses were kind of ahead in every role. I think it's what I am imagining is happening, which I can't speak to completely, but it seems like Inspired's just aggressiveness and pressure from the jungle to put pressure on his lanes and everything. And Vulcan seems to also be very impactful in terms of his. I would imagine he's doing a bit of the shot calling, the way that they're moving around, and that he is kind of looking to get ward coverage and move around and assist other lanes as well. I think they do. They look like kind of just this ball of death, just moving around from objective to objective, winning team fights, winning the 1v1s, and just kind of winning across the board. So very, very impressive from them in that matchup.
Yeah, big time. Kudos to EG. And then moving right along, we wanted to take a look at Jensen back in the LCS. Cloud9 had the first matchup of the summer split against Evil Geniuses with Jensen as their mid laner. We wanted to check in and see how it went. And I would say it delivered. I think Jensen played really well. The Victor looked super strong. There was a lot of elements from Cloud9 that looked really good. I think Fudge's Fiora was terrifying, to say the least. I think he was playing that really well. Obviously, at home in the top lane on the carry style top laner, so that was really fun. But yeah, I thought it was a fun game overall.
Yeah, and I agree. I think in general I was a little bummed that C9 started out 0-3 in the starting weekend, but of course they did not have their starting bot lane, which really seemed to be the area that was kind of lacking, getting further behind and allowing each of the other teams to kind of take advantages and end up winning those games. Unfortunately, like King and Destiny, I think it's a combination of them still improving as players, but also them being kind of thrust into this position where they probably have not practiced quite as much with the main roster, with Fudge, Blabber, and Jensen. So Jack had tweeted out earlier today that today is the first day of scrims with their actual LCS roster. So Berserker and Sven scrimming in the bot lane. I'm guessing there was just a slight delay after their boot camp in Korea for Berserker getting back with visa things. So it'll be interesting seeing and checking back in, I think, this coming week as to how they do this weekend and if they can make any kind of improvements or just see where the actual roster's at. Of course, still very early, and 1 week of scrims with the full squad is probably not going to make too many immediate leaps and bounds, but it'll be good to see them kind of as a whole the way that we're expecting. So
Yeah, I agree, and especially with the upgrade of, I can't speak too much of Berserker. I haven't watched as many of his games, but with Sven in particular, that's just going to be an insane upgrade. So I'm looking forward to seeing him in the support role for Cloud9. But even in the game against Evil Geniuses, I'm not even sure it was a concern of like the main roster or not. Jojo Pion was just 1v5 with Corky Rockets. Like,
yeah.
Some of those big ones that he landed just shut down fights for Cloud9. They were like, well, guess we can't go forward anymore. And like that was like, oh my God, like this champion is very strong.
So strong. And so they utilized it very well. They utilized the poke of the Ezreal and the Corki, but along with the Sejuani ults and Trundle being able to get in there, they played very well to kind of tie things up in a pretty competitive match. So, like I said, unfortunately, C9 not getting the win there, but it was interesting also seeing the Sejuani, as I had mentioned, coming into the top lane here in the LCS as well so early on. I think, like I said, I want to kind of keep an eye on some of those top lane picks and how the meta shifts and changes. Because I think that will be very interesting to kind of watch at how things evolve throughout the split.
Yeah, for sure. And obviously, yeah, game one, even over that weekend, I'm sure, picks developed and teams saw this and that. So that was a very, just fresh look at it. But overall, I think the team comps look pretty standard, other than, like you were saying, the Sedge top lane. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting split. EG starting it off on a fucking tear. Looking forward to Cloud9's full roster, and then we'll check in on some of the other teams as we move forward here.
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward to it. But Justin, did you have any other notes that you wanted to hit before we kind of get to the endings of the episode here?
No, not for League. I think we hit those games pretty well. Some of obviously some better performances than others, and obviously we won't be covering only these teams. We'll do our best to spread it out as well as we continue to squeeze the melons to see what is best for the viewers.
Sounds good. So looking forward to it.
Drop that melons reference, by the way.
Okay. But yes. So wrapping up the League of Legends talk, did we have any Magic the Gathering this week that we want to get into?
Only that I won games. That's all I guess I really want to say. Any like in-depth talk is kind of meh. But I just want to give a big shout out to Death Magic, Veil of Death MTG on YouTube. He is ever so gracious, inviting myself, Buddha, and Braxit on the regular to join him in games. So that's always really fun. So GG's to him, Buddha, and Braxit. It was really fun. Here's what I will say: we played 3 games. In game 3, I actively and chose to. I crunched the numbers. I went into the tank. I kept a no land hand, and I almost won the game.
Damn.
Yeah. So I took everything I learned about, keeping bad 7s and mulling to 5 and like all of that I've learned. I said, I can do this, and I almost fucking did it. So that was
Nice.
fun. But yeah, other than that, it was just fun to play with the fellas. We had some exciting games last night as well. I won the second one. I was at one life. They thought I was out of it, but I'm never out of it until until the cows come home. So I took that game in amazing fashion. Milk Breath was stunned. He said, "Oh, I can't believe it." So yeah, it was amazing. Won
Nice.
2 games in the last couple days, so it's been fun. Other than that, though, I'm ready to give him the flavor of the week. Aaron, what you got for us?
Sounds good. So for my food this past week, Colleen and I did some more homemade Indian style food. So we did
Yeah.
chicken tikka masala. It was using a store sauce. I have not delved too much still into that, but seasoned the chicken very well. Again, it's pretty easy, like meal to do, but also very tasty. So that is my food for this week. My visual medium, Colleen decided on Sunday night. I think it was Sunday evening. We were watching Shrek, so we watched Shrek. It was pretty entertaining. I think it has stood up pretty well over the years as a decently entertaining movie. And so for my music, it is also Shrek, because the soundtrack throughout that movie is very, very fun. I know, I mean, all the Smash Mouth songs and just everything. It was just a good time. So that is my flavor of the week for this week.
Very cool. To piggyback on the movie soundtracks being super enjoyable. For my music, me and Sarah watched the third Thor Ragnarok, and throughout the film, one of our comments was just like, "Man, this song fits this scene really well. Man, I love the soundtrack here." So definitely know the feeling. Shrek is love. Shrek is life. Obviously.
I did show
My
Colleen that video too. She had never
Yeah,
seen it. Hilarious. She was like,
that's
"What am I watching?"
so funny. Yeah, the internet's a scary place. My food for the week. I just want to highlight something my dad has said a couple of times. In thinking about like eating food out or like ordering or whatever, I'm often just like, I just want Sarah's cooking. Like every time I have something from here or there, like, oh yeah, I'll try that, or yeah, just get that. I'm often so disappointed. I'm just like, Sarah would make this so much better. I don't know why we just spend our paychecks on this. So yeah, often I'm just thinking about Sarah's cooking. She does it up the best. And then my visual medium, I don't know. It sounded familiar. Have you seen Wayward Pines?
Why does that sound familiar?
I don't know. But it is executive producer M. Night Shyamalan. So it's got all of the freaky deaky elements that you would expect from the man. And yeah, me and Sarah have gotten into season 2. I obviously make fun of it a whole lot. But yeah, it's kind of spooky dooky. There's some like funny stuff going on. But yeah, overall, it's like kind of wonky, but that's just what Sarah had on, so I sit down and just enjoy it with her. But yeah, short, sweet. That's my flavor of the week, my friend.
Very cool. I don't know why that sounds familiar, but I may have to check it out. Some M Night stuff is entertaining every now and then. So
Like you'll see all of his other films in the show. You're just like, oh, that's just like, oh, well, he did. Oh, well, don't you? Like, it
yeah.
all feels just like all of his tricks again in a TV show. It's like, okay, like there's a wall and a village.
So
I'm serious.
so I guess I may steer clear, but
You can and you won't miss anything.
that's interesting to say the least. He definitely has his shtick and kind of sticks to it. So,
Yeah.
But that does bring us to the end of this week's episode, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, as always, thank you all for coming and joining us, listening along. We want to hear what your flavor of the weeks are. Hit us with a comment. You can find us on Spotify, Google Podcasts. Check us out on YouTube. Check us out on Twitter. Hit us up on there. So we're always very appreciative of everyone who takes the time to join us.
At Tall and Short of One on Twitter. Join us every Thursday for new episodes on YouTube, or get the audio wherever you can find it. Join the Discord. Get chatting with us. But other than that, just thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for spending your time with us. And this has been another Tall and Short of It podcast. Peace out, everyone.
Later.